Hello, today I'm going to be reading chapter 12 of Takeout by Margaret Maron. Janice Jennings opened her red door Monday morning and said, "Hello again, Lieutenant Harrod, right?" "Harold," Sigurd said, "and I believe you've met Detective Hentz? We'd like to ask you more questions about Maddie Mouton." "Oh, sure." She stepped back to let them in. Today her bare feet had blue nail polish that matched her blue denim shirt. They said at the diner that he'd been poisoned. "That's right. And you haven't found who did it?" "No, no arrests yet." They were ushered into a large, comfortable room that could have been the lobby of a good hotel. Oriental rugs covered the hardwood floor and defined two separate seating areas with couches and armchairs. The sheer window curtains gave privacy, yet still allowed the morning sun to light up the room. A vase of fresh daisies stood on a side table, and soft music issued from concealed speakers. In front of the tall windows stood a mahogany card table with four straight chairs that would do nicely for an interview. Sigrid chose to sit in the one with its back to the windows, so that light fell on Janice Jennings' face when she joined them. Her long brown hair hung loosely on her sturdy shoulders. Her only jewelry was a small gold cross that dangled from a thin chain. "Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee?" "We're fine," Sigurd said. "Could you tell us again in more detail about your dealings with Maddie Mouton? How you met? What you know about him?" "It was back in January. I'd seen him around the neighborhood, but I didn't know who he was at first, till they told me at the diner. They said he was connected with the Delvico woman. That he used to be her driver for a while until she fired him for using drugs. Evidently, he used to be heavy into meth. Then she and her daughter got him into rehab, and things were fine till this past winter when he started using again. I guess he hit the skids and went straight down the tubes, and that's when they gave up on him. Forbade him to come to the house." Jennings leaned back in the chair with her strong hands clasped together on the table in front of her. "I suppose that's what drew me to him. Stray dogs and anybody Sophia Delvico's down on. She's absolutely convinced that I'm running a whorehouse, and she's done everything she could to run me off. Unfortunately for her, this side of the street is zoned for business, and it's completely legal to register my building as an SRO and to have a jazz club in the basement." She gave an amused smile. "I'm not wedded to this neighborhood, though. I could open up anywhere, so I told her lawyer she could have this place for $4 million. "I'm guessing she didn't want it at that price," said Hentz. "You're right about that. Anyhow, I first met Maddie when I was bringing home some egg rolls for lunch. It was right around New Year's and colder than an ice cube sandwich. He was on the bench, wrapped in a blanket, and he was crying like his heart had broken into a million pieces, really sobbing. I gave him some money and my egg rolls. While she talked, Jennings gathered up her thick brown hair and braided it into a single plait. She fished a rubber band from the pocket of her white shorts to secure the end and tossed the braid over her shoulder. He was there 2 days later, and he still looked so woebegone that I knew he needed some hugs. I brought him back here with me, cleaned him up, and cuddled him for over 2 hours. He cried some more and said there was no one left to hug him ever again. It was really pitiful. I tried to get him to talk to me, tell, tell me why his life had gone off the tracks, but he wouldn't open up. That's when I asked Peg to take him on. I think she saw him twice, but you'll have to ask her. Shall I tell her you're here?" Please, said Sigurd, and watched as Jennings walked over to the staircase and opened an inconspicuous panel that hid an intercom system. They heard her say, "Peg, the police are here. Can you come down?" The speaker crackled, and a woman's voice said, "Be right there." Minutes later, Peg Overhold joined them in a lounge. Early 40s, her auburn hair was lightly threaded with gray at the temples, and there was something motherly about her smile. Janice Jennings made the introductions, then left them. "You want to hear about Maddie?" she asked. They nodded. She cleared her throat. "I guess Janice told you how she got me to give him a session. We'd like to hear it fresh from you, please." Janice has a heart as big as Texas, and she felt sorry for the kid. Peg Overhold had a laugh that bubbled up from her chest. "Kid? Ha! He was probably at least as old as us, but there was something about him that made you think of your kid brother. Like he, like he never finished growing up or something. Anyhow, Janice found him crying on the bench down there. She brought him home with her and gave him a free session. Next time she saw him, he seemed just as miserable, so she asked if I'd take him. I sort of have a knack for getting people to talk to me about what's hurting them." She cleared her throat again. "Sorry, airplanes trigger my allergies." A bowl of individually wrapped hard candies sat on one of the side tables, and she got up to get a couple. "Anybody else want one?" Sigurd and Hens both shook their heads and waited till she had removed the cellophane and popped one into her mouth. The smell of peppermint wreathed her. "So you cuddled him?" Hens asked, with a straight face. "He was a smelly mess," said Overhold, grimacing in memory. "But money was tight for me after Christmas, and I was behind in my rent, so Janice said she'd knock some of it off if I'd do it. We keep changes of clean clothes here." He took a shower, washed his hair, and put on a pair of our pajamas, and we lay down next to each other on my bed. We don't kiss, and we certainly don't have sex, but I hugged him, smoothed his arm, stroked his cheek. He was so damn grateful. Kept thanking me. He cried all through most of our first session. His cousin had died back in December. He adored her, and he said that she was the only one who loved him. That the only reason Ms. Delvico had hired him to drive for her was because his cousin had asked her to. After the cousin died, he was out of a job, and that's when he started using again. Sigurd was frowning. "How did his cousin die?" "A car accident. He didn't tell me any details the first time, but I gave him another session about a week later, and that's when he really opened up." She unwrapped a second mitt. "He said his cousin was in town to see a play and go Christmas shopping, but there was something wrong with the car, so she had to take a cab. She was finished shopping and was crossing the street when a car knocked her down and ran her over. Hit and run. Maddie was so distraught when he heard about it that he blamed himself for the accident. He said if he'd been driving her, she would still be alive. That's when he went back on meth, and that's when Ms. Delvico fired him. He thought she blamed him too, her and her housekeeper both. He told me that the housekeeper might bring food to him, but she acted like she wanted to spit on him. That's when he started crying again. Poor guy. Did he tell you his cousin's name?" "Area." Surprised, Sigurd glanced at Hens and saw that he, too, had picked up on the name of George Edward's wife. "His cousin was Ms. Delvico's daughter?" The woman nodded. "Did he mention any enemies, anybody he was having problems with?" No, just how much he missed his cousin. What about friends, other relatives? If he'd had friends or loving relatives, Lieutenant, he wouldn't have needed my services. Before they could ask more questions, the doorbell rang and Peg Overhold jumped up to answer it. If that's my client, I'll have to stop now. We're finished for now, Sigurd said. Thank you for your help. She and Hence followed her out to the foyer, where Overhold opened the door for a tiny, frail woman who stood on the top step. Come in, love, Overhold said, and put her arm around the stooped shoulders to guide her in. Out on the sidewalk, Sigurd looked at Hence. George Edwards said that neither he nor his mother-in-law had spoken to Mattie since December. I suppose this is why. As they walked away, they heard Peg Overhold call to them from the top of the stoop. I almost forgot, she said as she came down to meet them. The last time Mattie was here, I had our cleaning woman put his clothes through the laundry. She found this picture when she emptied his pockets, and I didn't see it till after he was gone. I kept meaning to give it back to him, and just never did. She handed Sigrid a 3x4 clear plastic sleeve that held a snapshot of Mattie in younger, happier times. He sat on the hood of an Oldsmobile beside a very pretty blonde teenager. Both were laughing. Sigrid turned it over. On the back, in pencil, was a scrawled inscription. Me and area, 4th of July. Poor Matty, Overhold said. His bitchy godmother wouldn't even let him come to the funeral. At the newsstand on West 44th, one of the vendor's regular customers looked at the flyer tacked on the side frame and said, That looks like a Jack Bloss. What's he done? Who's Jack Bloss? Asked the vendor. Used to live in my building till they raised the rent last time. And how the hell's the city's gonna hold on to people like us, living on a fixed income, when they let landlords gouge us and... Yeah, said the vendor who'd heard it all before. On his cell phone, he punched in the number listed at the bottom of the flyer. So where was he living now? And that's the end of chapter 12, and I will see you all again tomorrow for chapter 13, and as always, have a wonderful day.